I'm your host, Vinny Berry. You are listening to the Wrestleville podcast, part of the Fans First Sports Network, where you can find this episode and all our other episodes where you snag your downloads or at Wrestleville.com. We also have a YouTube page where you can see clips and interviews of your favorite wrestling superstars. And if you listen to us on Spotify, please give us a like and a listen. It goes a long way. My guest this episode is the veteran Dak Vaughn. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Hey man, thank you. Thank you. What a an honor to speak to you. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while, and you are fun to watch. And matter of fact, this week I got a clip, a reel that you put out on Facebook, I believe. You were like following two wrestlers that were like
Oh,
bickering with each other
yeah, yeah, yeah.
on very funny stuff, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
So 20 years, 21 years, you just hit your 21-year mark. How's it
Sure
feel,
did.
man? I mean, and how's the body feel after all these years too?
Honestly, like you would think that now, obviously, like I wasn't wrestling a schedule for 21 years like a WWE guy would be. So, mostly just been the quote unquote weekend warrior, working a couple shows a year or a couple shows a week. But I mean, honestly, my body feels pretty good. I work a pretty uh non high risk style, low risk, I guess. So my body feels pretty good. I'm not taking a bunch of crazy bumps. I'm not, putting my body through hell every week. So I feel pretty good for someone that's been around as long as I have. I did, I took probably about 5 years break. Like I started in '04 and then I retired like all wrestlers do in 2013. And I think I took like a solid 3 years where I didn't take any bookings. And then for another couple years, it was kinda just sporadic, like a handful of shows a year. And then it was in 2019 that I decided I wanted to come back and kinda get full-time back into it, and didn't have a lot of luck with the bookings, probably only maybe did like 10 shows that year, and then COVID hit in 2020. And then so it added a couple extra years on, so there's probably about a 6-year gap there where I really wasn't wrestling a whole lot.
Yeah.
But started in '04, so I've been around for 21 years.
Right, right. Exactly. It makes sense to me. So but you started 21 years ago. And I'm sure you've been around the business, right? Hey, let me ask
Oh,
you
yeah.
this. What was the thought process going into the decision that you were going to take that hiatus?
So, I had been wrestling for about 10 years at that point and hadn't really done a whole lot of anything. Was mostly just staying in the Cincinnati area. Cincinnati and Dayton, really wasn't getting outside of that area very much. And, it's one of those things where looking back on it now, I can be honest about it and be like, yeah, it was a lot of bitterness. It was a lot of um, envy. I had seen some guys that I had started out wrestling with that were getting good opportunities and doing bigger things than me. And, everyone in the wrestling always thinks that everyone else is worse than them. So, I was kind of looking at it like, oh, well, why are these guys getting opportunities and I'm not? And kind of just got frustrated with wrestling. And I had just gotten married and some certain things in my life had just become more important to me. And I just decided, you know what? I'm just gonna call it a day. So um it was probably about 4 months after I made that decision that I actually had my retirement match. But yeah, it was just a lot of, just getting bitter about wrestling and things not going my way. And unfortunately, I didn't really have a lot of people when I first started kind of teaching me the right way. I knew how to do the in-ring stuff. That kind of came as second nature, but I didn't have people telling me, "Hey, you need to get on the road, you need to network, you need to meet people, you need to wrestle for new companies." I kind of just got stuck wrestling for the same companies in Cincinnati and just didn't do a whole lot.
Right. Yeah, and that's important too. If there's a young wrestler listening to this, it is important to move out and get out of your comfort zone, right? Not That's what several wrestlers have told me. Um, and for someone like yourself who didn't do a lot of that, now looking back, I mean, yeah, you really can state the fact that that's true, right?
I can look back and be like, "Hey, I didn't do it the right way." You know, but, some people are happy just being local guys, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for someone like me, like, I wanted to make it big. I wanted to be on the big stage. I just didn't know how to do it and didn't have anyone, you know, bringing me along to help me. So it's one of those things where it was kind of like, I tell young guys all the time, like, you're not going to get any better wrestling for the same companies, wrestling the same people every week. You need to get out there, wrestle people better than you, go to more trainings, go to more seminars, because there's a lot of knowledge out there that you don't have. So go find it.
Right. And basically, after you go through your initial training, your school training, and you go out on the scene, it's basically on the job training from there and you can take it as far as you want, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what happens to a lot of guys is they go to a wrestling school that's affiliated with a certain company. And then they feel obligated, like it's almost like they feel like they owe that company everything. But once you're done paying for your training, like once that initial payment is done, you don't need to be loyal to anybody because, like you said, like we're independent contractors. Like after you pay your debt, you're free to go and do whatever you want, and you don't need to feel bad about it. And I think that's part of one of the big problems with certain training facilities is that they try to guilt you into stay in one spot, and because they'll tell you, hey, we can't use you if you're going to be gone. So and then you kind of fall into this level of complacency and then get stuck.
Now, with you where you're at in your career, you wrestle pretty much full time. I would say what for Ohio Valley Wrestling, right? That's probably your home. We would
That
say.
would be like my main base. Yeah.
Okay.
They have TV every Thursday, so I'm there every Thursday. And then I try to make most of the pay-per-views, but my Friday, Saturday, Sundays are all over the country and sometimes all over the world.
Yeah, and that's where I was going. So what are you doing different today than you didn't do in your younger years as far as traveling out? So you said you're going out all over the United States and you've gone out to the country. Uh let's talk about your overseas trips. You went to Europe a few times. What was that like?
It's, a little intimidating at first. Every time I've gone with my buddy Jake Oman, who is very well versed in international travel. He's now wrestled in 30 something countries. He's been to 40 countries. And, if I didn't have him, I probably wouldn't have gone because he kind of takes care of all the logistics. But yeah, the first time I went was in 2022, and I've gone once a year since then. So the first year we went to Finland and Sweden, and then we went to the UK and Romania, and then this past year was in Bulgaria and Poland.
Wow. Yeah,
It's
what
it's
were
definitely it's a culture shock for sure. Like it's you get in the States you're used to a certain level of comfort, and then when and I've been very lucky that everywhere we've gone, everywhere I've gone with Jake, we've had like great accommodations. We've had great people taking care of us. They always have like rooms for us, and they they're always offering to take us out to get dinner and stuff like that. I've heard some horror stories from Jake where he's basically slept on like a concrete bench overnight because he just didn't have anywhere to stay that night. So yeah, so uh, I've been very lucky in that all of my overseas trips have been pretty great.
and what are the crowds like over there? Is it I mean, is it basically like wrestling in the States? Or I mean, what were the differences that you saw?
So there's not as much wrestling over there as you can see in this. I mean, you can go to pretty much any town in America on a Saturday night and find good wrestling or bad wrestling. There's a lot of bad wrestling out there in the States this right now. But yeah, over in Europe, like pro wrestling outside of like the major areas like, the UK and stuff like that, they don't have wrestling every other town. So it's something that they don't get to see live very often because obviously, like, I know the WWE is doing a big European tour right now, but they're not there all the time. So they get really into the shows, which is um, a breath of fresh air. Sometimes you go to the indie shows here in the States, and it's just like they just want to sit on their hands because it's the same people they see every week. But no, over in Europe, it's even if the crowds are down, they're all into the show, which is great. Like, even, like, a small crowd and a pack and a a sorry, tripping over my words here. A small building that's packed out with fans that are, into the show, those are some of my favorite shows, regardless if it's in Europe or the States, and you get a lot of that over in Europe.
Yeah. And when you're over there, because this is what I would be like. Like, well, when's the next time I'm ever going to be in Europe, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, do you stop and smell the roses? You take the opportunity to visit what you can when you're not working?
Oh, yeah, yeah, usually, when we usually have a couple days for, like, sightseeing and travel and stuff like that, so, we definitely try to we spend a lot of time walking, so which is great because like, there's so much cool stuff to see, there's so much culture around, so, we do spend a lot of time on our feet, just kinda like, "Hey, let's walk in this direction today and see what we can find over the next, however many miles we're gonna walk."
Yeah, because you've never seen it before, right?
Sure. Yeah, and I don't know if I'm ever gonna go to these countries again, I would love to. We've already been, invited back to Bulgaria. I don't know if hopefully I'll be able to make that happen, but, like, when I'm over there, it's like, yeah, let's see as much of this city as we can, because
Yeah.
it's why would I go there and not wanna experience it, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that would be the really cool part of doing something like that, right? Uh, going to different places and just kind of seeing what's out there. I I've uh I've traveled in a lot of the states and I just love the fact, and especially when I'm with my wife, she's a she's the smell the roses kind of girl. And so
Yeah.
you talk about getting the 50-cent tour. it's
Right.
it it's enjoyable. It's
Oh,
like, wow.
sure.
So, yeah, it's good for you. It's good that you had the opportunity to go overseas and to see places like that and to experience the wrestling. What are the fans like? Are they receptive to you and your friends?
Absolutely. And I think, even more so because I think for a lot, because when we go over, we haven't worked for like any of like the really big companies in Europe. It's usually these smaller companies and they don't see a lot of Americans coming out that way. So they're just appreciative that, we were willing to come to their country and do our thing. So they've always been very receptive. And I have the bonus of my social media doing very well for me. So, I've actually been to, some of these countries where they already know who I am, which is still very surreal to me when it happens, but is very cool.
Well, the last couple years, you really gained in popularity. I
Mhm.
I I would say, right? I
Yeah.
mean, and so I see you quite often. I see your social media. You know, it's for those who don't know how much work social media is, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, it's almost like having another part-time job for me. I spend so much time, like, especially with the videos, like, I have to find time to record, and I try to, I try to, like, knock out as many as I can at one time, but sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. And it's like, well, sometimes I'm scrambling to think of an idea not think of an idea, but find time to, like, record. Because I try to be consistent with when I post. I try to do the videos every Tuesday and Friday. And then I try to make just random posts here and there on, social media, just, every other day of the week. But yeah, it people don't, take into account that it is very time consuming.
Yeah. Yeah. With what I do with my books and my interviews and trying to stay on top of that and letting the listener know and the people on social media know that, hey, I got a new show, or hey, I got a new book. And yeah, it's it is a lot of work, and I find it, and maybe you do too. Sometimes I'm working on this over here, and then this other thing that I'm supposed to be doing maybe doesn't get the attention, right?
Yeah,
And
for
then,
sure.
hey man, I haven't edited any of my interviews, and I better work on that. Or I haven't written anything in a month. I
Yeah.
better do that. And so what are some of the things that you juggle or struggle with, like putting attention here and then not doing it over here and vice versa?
Yeah. Yeah, the big one for me is, like, I need to be better about putting video like, I have a YouTube channel that I don't update a lot, and it's mostly just for matches. I just put, like, anytime that I have, like, a particularly good match, I try to, get it on there, but I spend so much time doing everything else, and, just to kinda pull back the curtain here, like, I don't wrestle as a full-time job. Um, I wrestle full-time, basically. I'm wrestling 3 to 4 times a week, but, I do work a normal, full-time job, wrestle as much as I do. It's, after, the fact that I'm talking to you on a Sunday without having to either go to a wrestling show or my job is a very rare occurrence. So and then after today, I think I have 2 straight weeks where I have something every day, either work or wrestling. So, and then on top of that, trying to find time with the social media. So, the YouTube is the one that I really like to try to get more involved with, but it's just like when I do have that, you know, couple hours of free time, I wanna relax because I don't don't get a chance to really sit around and do nothing a whole lot, but yeah, I think the YouTube channel is the thing that's really struggled.
No, mine too.
Yeah.
Mine too. Hey, over the years, your name has changed a little bit. You've
Mhm.
had different names, and how is the persona uh kind of evolved over the years as well?
Yeah, so when I first started wrestling, I was given the name Muldoon. It was not a name that I chose. It was the name that I was given by the company that I worked for. And it was really like they kind of just wanted me to be the quiet monster big man. And, as much as, I understand like certain guys really thrive in that kind of character, that's not my personality. So I never really quite knew how to do that character. And when I was younger, especially, it was one of those things where it was because partly because I just didn't understand wrestling at the time, but it was like I wanted to go out there and, have these incredible matches and bump around and all this stuff. And they're like, "No, you're so much bigger than everyone. You don't need to be doing all that." At the time, I didn't understand it. But now it's one of those things I find myself telling young guys a lot. It's like when they're bigger, like, "Hey, you don't need to be doing all that. Trust me." Um, but yeah, and that was just like that was one of those characters that just really it had a ceiling and just wasn't a whole lot to it. And then when I left that company, started doing things differently, I really struggled finding a character that really worked for me. Um, I was just going by my, spoilers, Jack Vaughn's not my real name. I was going, by my real name at the time, and there really just wasn't a whole lot to it. And I struggled, and that's when I decided to take my break from wrestling. And then when I first came back, I was Wild Thing Jack Vaughn and just ripped off Rick Vaughn from Major League.
Right.
Um, and I did that for a handful of matches, and it was fine. It was something different. It gave me an opportunity to like let my personality show through. And early 2020, I was at a show with some friends of mine, and we were just kind of talking after the show, and it was like, hey, like man, someone needs to just be like that old grizzled, bitter old man in wrestling who just hates what these young guys are doing and they're killing his sport. And I was like, yeah, someone needs to do that. And then I was driving home because I had about a 2-hour drive home, and I was just thinking about this character the whole time, not even thinking that I was gonna do it. And I was like, man, yeah, like someone should do that. And then I was like, I should do that. And I just out loud, I just said the veteran Jack Vaughn, and I was like, that's it. And I, like, immediately, like, the next day, I was, calling my buddy with all these ideas, like, "Let me know what you think." And, it just kinda went from there, and it's they say that the best characters in wrestling are extensions of your real personality, and the veteran is very much that. Obviously, it's my real self kind of cranked up to 11, so to speak. I'm not nearly as bitter and angry at the young guys as the character is, but, it is one of those things, like, I do prefer, uh, you know, storytelling over moves. I do think the guys get too caught up doing moves and spots and this whole work rate stuff, and I don't like it and I don't get it. So it is an extension of how I really feel about wrestling.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point, storytelling, that comes up a lot of my interviews, especially with people who've been around for a long time. I guarantee, I could almost put money down that every time that I've walked away from a match saying, "That was a that was a good match," because there was a story being told in there.
Mm. Yeah.
And, um, of course, I go to a lot of shows where there's, the newer generation seems to think that they have to go 55 miles an hour.
Mhm. Yeah, and, if that's not to say that there's not a place for that. Um, and I'll always tell guys, like, "Listen, if that's what you need to do to make your money, then do it, because none of us are gonna be able to do this forever, so make as much money as you can, and if going out there and doing 100 spots in a match is what gets you over and makes you money, then, hey, who am I to tell you what to do?" But I've just always preferred, the storytelling kind of wrestling. I've always enjoyed, like, let's create moments rather than spots, because I think about some of the best matches I've ever seen, and I don't really remember a lot of spots in the match. I remember the way those matches made me feel. I remember the finishes because of, like, the drama and the build and stuff like that. But if you asked me, like, "Hey, what was, like, the biggest spot in the match?" The finish, because it's the one that I remember.
Right.
There could have been 100 other different things that they did that were cooler, but the finish is what I remember.
Right. Right. You have a distinct look, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you I'm sure you get noticed a lot. I mean, right?
Yeah. It still kind of freaks me out when it happens, but occasionally I do get noticed outside of, like, wrestling shows, which is fun.
Oh, I don't know how you wouldn't, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
if I would see you, I would, "Hey, are you Jack Don?" Because
Yeah.
yeah, you
I do think that, like, the look and just the fact that I'm such a big guy, like, I do obviously stand out in a crowd, so, it's one of those things where, like, even if, you hear about, like, the airport test, like, people walking through an airport, are they gonna notice you? That's that old story, and, I like to think that I would. I get a lot of people looking my way just because, like, "Oh god, look at that giant dude with this bald head and mustache." So,
right, right.
yeah.
Yeah, and so, yeah, that's gotta be exciting for the fans that watch
Mhm.
wrestling, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, you wrestle currently, we already touched on that you wrestle a lot for OVW. How has OVW, say, changed since the wrestler the wrestlers documentary that aired on Netflix?
Yes. Well, obviously, the documentary gave us a new level of recognition. Um, but it's crazy because you think that, like, something big like that happens and you expect it to ride that wave forever, and that's not how it works. Um, Now overall, the crowds are higher than they were before the show. That's undeniable. But it's not one of those things where, like, after the show debuted, we sold out like 12 straight weeks or something like that. And that doesn't happen anymore. We still get good crowds. They're still really into the show. Um, but people, you're not, it's unfortunately, it's not things don't last forever, and so that I think that's our goal, is to try to get back to that, to try to get to that point where we are selling out every week. And then I think, you know, there we made some improvements to the building and stuff like that, try to give it a more professional look, which has been great. But I think overall, like, the wrestlers, the guys, the locker room, stuff like that, it's kind of business as usual. It's very much a family feel. Kind of like, because there's a lot of people online that hate OVW, and I kind of don't get it. Now, granted, I am sort of new to OVW, so I don't know if there was some stuff that happened back in the day because I wasn't paying attention to OVW history. But there's a lot of people online that really are, like, rooting for OVW to fail, and you know, I it is what it is. You're never gonna please everybody. I know that firsthand from the stuff that I do online. But no, man, it's we kind of look at it like, okay, let them hate us. We'll just do our thing, and the people that come to the shows love it. So we don't wrestle for the haters. We wrestle for the people that enjoy what we do.
Right, right. Yeah. You know, with my books, it's funny. 10 people can tell me how much they enjoyed it, and one person can tell me that he thought it sucked, and that's all I can think about, you know?
Sure. No, no, I get it. Like, and it's the same thing with like my social media stuff. It's like for every person that trashes me, I have 20 people that love what I do.
Right.
But it's like when you hear that one negative comment, you're like, well, screw this guy. You're like, why is he so upset about what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And I mean, like, it doesn't concern him. It doesn't hurt him. So why is he so angry about what I'm doing? And
Yeah.
yeah,
Hey, and
I get that a lot.
if you don't like Coke, drink Pepsi,
Right.
right?
And I get people that like, they'll talk trash and then they don't, I don't hear from them for months and then they randomly comment on another video. And it's like, okay, like if you don't want to see my stuff, dude, then just block me. Like it's really not that hard.
Right. I I think people sometimes need a punching bag.
Yeah, well, and it's easy to talk trash online
Yes.
because you're behind a veil of anonymity. You don't even have to put your own picture, on social media if you don't want to. So, it's easy to talk trash behind a keyboard, but I doubt many of these people would say this kind of stuff to my face.
Yeah, and when I get comments like that on some of my stuff that I post, I have to kinda check myself a little bit about how I respond to that
Mhm.
because, uh, texting is perceived a little different than what
Sure.
you and so if you are upset, it's kinda almost like times 10.
Sure.
"What did you
Yeah, and I
mean
know
by
that,
that?"
like, yeah, sometimes, yeah, context does not come through
Right,
in text
right.
very often. So I know that I've had times where like someone said something and I didn't quite understand that they were like joking. So I say something really, kind of snarky back to them, and then my wife will be like, "You know that they're joking, right?" And I'm like, "Oh my god," I have to like delete it and like kind of like apologize, sort of. But honestly, like I've kind of gotten to the point that I really don't even pay attention anymore to like negative stuff. I it's funny how it works because especially if I on Twitter, because Twitter's the most there's the most what's the word I'm looking for? The most like vitriol. That's where I get the most hate. But I kind of know if something that I post is gonna get a lot of hate. So I kind of like post it and then don't even look at Twitter for like 3 days. And then, you know, on other social media platforms, uh, videos will kind of do well a few days after. Like they'll be posted for like 48 hours and then they finally start to hit. And that's when I know, oh, okay, so all the negative comments are new. So I'm not even going to bother going to look at them. So and plus, I kind of, at the end of the day, like it's people that are talking trash are people that haven't even tried what I failed at. You know what I mean? Like, and they're never going to. They're never even gonna try to be professional wrestlers, but they all think they know professional wrestling better than me. So I just don't even take anything that they say seriously. So
Right.
don't
Yeah,
even look
no,
at it.
I hear you. The people that we should be, you know, concerned about what they're saying is our circle, right? The
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
the people that care about us and we care about them. Those are the people we should, "Hey, what's your honest opinion?" You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well, and I don't I don't necessarily get a lot of hate from like my peers, wrestlers. Occasionally I do, but it's usually not anyone that I know.
right.
Um,
But I'm
but like
talking like constructive criticism, you know?
yeah, yeah, I don't it's usually just them being mad about me saying something that they do is, like, wrong. But, um they also they don't know me as a person, so they don't know that it's kind of tongue in cheek and satirical and stuff like that. Oh, sorry. Sorry, real quick, I'm gonna open this. How about that? And then, yeah, but, like, I also have had, interactions with some of the biggest stars in wrestling today that have all come up to me to shake my hand and say that they love the videos.
Yeah.
And it's definitely people that you've heard of. It's people at the top levels of the business today. I'm not gonna drop names because I'm not that kind of guy. But like, if those guys love what I'm doing, then it doesn't matter to me what some, guy who wrestles in front of 50 people in the middle of nowhere has to say. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, yeah. Well, I enjoy what you're doing. And you definitely got on my radar, and you're the type of wrestler that I like. I like to watch wrestling and laugh, right? I like to get taken into, but I like the zingers and stuff that, I like when I'm not expecting to laugh, but I do, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
That stuff, and that's why I like wrestling. Um, where do you see yourself 2 to 3 years? What do you see for yourself in 2025? What are your short-term goals?
Obviously, the goal is always to make wrestling a full-time gig. It's always gonna be to get a contract somewhere. Um, I turned 40 this year, so I know that, like, in the past, being 40 was kinda like, "Well, no one's gonna be interested." I feel like that has kind of waned over the last few years. I mean, case in point, look at, like, LA Knight. I mean, the guy's, I think, 42, 43, and obviously, he had a great career before with NWA and Impact and all that stuff, but, he's, like, the one guy that really gives me hope that, like, "Hey, maybe someone will give me an opportunity." So that's still the goal, is to try to get that. 2025, I mean, just, you know, keep busy, just keep getting my name out there, keep growing the social media, keep growing the following, and hopefully it leads to some big opportunities for me. I know that all the big companies know who I am, so I got that going for me. I just need one of them to actually give me an opportunity.
I don't know how they can't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I have contacts at all the companies, and they all talk about, like, yeah, your videos are very popular here. Like, we share them around the locker room, and everyone loves you. But unfortunately, it just hasn't translated into any opportunities with those companies, and that's really what I'm trying to get from this year. As far as, like, where I see myself in 2 to 3 years, it just depends on how well things go for me. I'm exhausted. The last few years I've been going so hard, and I'm getting older, and even though I'm not in pain all the time, I do feel the aches and pains from being a wrestler as long as I have. So I don't want to go as hard as I have in the last few years. My goal is honestly try to get a job with one of the bigger companies, and then just do that for as long as I can, with maybe some select independent bookings here and there. But I definitely don't want to be on the road, 3 days a week, like, spending all my weekends on the road like I have been the last few years.
well, I'm rooting for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. How can people find you on social media?
Pretty much everywhere you can find me at Vet Jack Vaughn, and that's VAUGHN.
Right. It has been a pleasure. Thank you very much for giving me your time.
Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're listening to the Wrestleville podcast, where wrestling lives.